Lebensraum, which translates to living space, was a specific promise that Hitler made to the German people. He emphasized the necessity of territorial expansion to enable his Aryan population to settle and exploit the region's material resources, specifically the ones on the east. In March 1935, Hitler announced that German rearmament would commence, marking a period of increased industrialization, economic growth, and the expansion of the German army. Taking a bold step in 1936, Hitler reoccupied the Rhineland and shortly after formed a military alliance with Benito Mussolini in Italy, sending a message to Europe. In March 1938, Hitler tested the Allied powers by annexing Austria in an event known as the Anschluss. In response to the Munich Agreement, the Allies celebrated and did absolutely nothing, allowing Germany to take the Sudetenland, or parts of Czechoslovakia. Just 6 months later, Hitler violated the agreement, making a fool out of the Allies. Later in August 1939, Hitler surprised the world by signing the Nazi-Soviet Pact, a non-aggression treaty that included a secret agreement to invade and divide Poland. In September, both Hitler and later Stalin executed their plan, officially marking the start of World War II. Following the successful implementation of new tactics in Poland, Hitler turned his attention to the West, where he sought to test the capabilities of his new developed armored divisions in the Low Countries and eventually France. Although Hitler anticipated an Allied attack, impatience led Germany to swiftly overrun Denmark within a mere 6 hours before launching their invasion of Norway. Although devastating for the Navy, this maneuver secured and facilitated the crucial trade route with neutral Sweden. Between May and June 1940, Germany swiftly invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France, using tactics of blitzkrieg, rapid and coordinated air and ground attacks that quickly overwhelmed opposing forces. Moving forward, Italy disastrously tried to invade Greece and Yugoslavia in 1940, requiring German assistance to maintain their southern European front. On the other side of the Mediterranean, Italy's difficulties continued, requiring Germany's support in the form of Rommel and the Afrika Korps. Meanwhile, in Europe, Britain took the war to the skies, ultimately leading to the abandonment of Operation Sea Lion, the hypothetical amphibious invasion of Britain. Nevertheless, Hitler's confidence in his tanks and blitzkrieg tactics gave rise to Operation Barbarossa. In June 1941, 3 million German soldiers launched a mighty invasion of the Soviet Union. While initial blitzkrieg tactics once again proved successful, Hitler's military incompetence and ignorance halted the advance due to October's wet weather and the later harsh winter conditions. This gave a fierce and strong Soviet army, anxious for a counterattack, the perfect opportunity to start pushing back. The introduction of the United States into the war following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 shifted the balance of power in favor of the Allies. Their support in North Africa, Italy, France, and their relentless bombing campaigns in the final stages of the war started to break German morale and strength. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point, but the tide decisively turned with the Allied invasion of Normandy in June 1944. By May, Germany was completely surrounded, which meant the end of the Third Reich. During his first year in power, Hitler reduced unemployment by over 1/3. By 1939, unemployment was basically at 0%, and the gross national income was skyrocketing. How did they do this? Was Hitler an economic genius? The Great Depression of 1929 triggered a banking and financial crisis in Germany. The subsequent economic collapse and political instability led to the destruction of the Weimar Republic. In 1933, fresh in power, Hitler had to solve two particular issues: 6 million unemployed Germans and a costly dependence on foreign goods. To fulfill his promise of work and bread, Hitler hoped to transform Germany into an autarky. This meant a closed economy that did not engage in international trade and, therefore, an economically independent and self-sufficient nation. Hitler intended to do this through three specific strategies: public works, rearmament, and expansion through war. Let's take a closer look. Unemployment was tackled by setting up various organizations and public work programs to get Germany back to work. Some of these included the construction of hospitals, schools, housing, dams, power plants, and public buildings such as the 1936 Olympic Stadium. These generated jobs for Germans and drastically lowered unemployment. For example, the building of the Autobahn alone created work for 80,000 German men. The Nazis were also able to lower unemployment and control their workers by promoting national services and programs. For example, the RAD, or National Labor Service, let's say, persuaded all men between 18 and 25 to spend 6 months in nature, planting trees, digging, and draining ditches. The new DAF, or German Labor Front, replaced the annoying trade unions, controlling and protecting workers' rights. Organizations like the KDF, or Strength Through Joy, provided workers with leisure activities and supplied the affordable KDF wagon to all German workers. This encouraged hard work as it provided Germans with a healthy relationship with their jobs. The four-year plan of 1936, led by Hermann Göring, saw Hitler's first time directly intervening with the economy. The plan aimed to accelerate the rearmament of the German military and worked towards creating a self-sufficient German economy. And it was remarkably successful. What are we doing? Why aren't we just copying Nazi Germany? They have 0% unemployment. Why can't we just do this everywhere else around the world? Like, the gross national product of Germany skyrocketed. Look how happy these workers are. Of course, they're all protected and they all have new cars. They're all going on vacation. Wait, why are they dressed like that? Yeah, the problem is, it's not true at all. Many historians like Timothy W. Mason suggested that the miraculous recovery of the labor market under Hitler was more appearance than reality. The German propaganda machine proved successful once again. The new organizations and programs didn't really benefit the workers that much. It benefited the party. The RAD literally forced young men into forests to work. Unionization was now lost under the Nazi-controlled DAF, and no private citizen ever received a KDF wagon. The four-year plan of 1936, with its primary focus on rearmament, did contribute to a decline in unemployment as thousands were conscripted into the army. Numerous factories were established, and it eventually had a positive impact on German economy. However, this apparent economic growth was often a result of statistical manipulation, which was a propaganda tactic used by the Nazis. In reality, the German economic growth figures were exaggerated, and invisible employment was a method used to manipulate statistics. Through exclusions and arrests, the Nazis hid the levels of unemployment. Those who the Nazis considered undesirable or inferior, such as women and Jews, were excluded from the unemployment figures, which reduced the percentage significantly. This practice allowed the Nazis to distort these numbers, creating the false impression of reduced unemployment rates while systematically oppressing and exploiting vulnerable populations. With war on the horizon, Hitler understood that Germany needed to achieve full autarky. However, in a globalized world, achieving autarky was virtually impossible. They needed Romanian oil, Swedish steel, Ukrainian wheat, and Indonesian rubber. Propaganda efforts were made to promote German goods, but ultimately, Germany did not possess the resources to achieve this. The outbreak of war in Germany brought hope and had a minimal effect on the German people, as early victories brought an influx of raw materials and luxuries from annexed countries, bolstering supplies and boosting the economy. This war also created millions of jobs for German citizens. For example, by 1939, the Wehrmacht had reached a total of 4,220,000 soldiers, and by 1943, it reached a peak of 9,480,000 soldiers. This meant that these jobs had to be replaced back home, further lowering the unemployment rate. However, as the war efforts continued, the civilian population and its industries began to experience problems. Rationing was implemented in 1939, and the developments of strategic bombardment from 1942 to 1945 brought death and destruction to German civilians, who endured bombing raids that tragically claimed around 3.5 million lives. These raids by British and American bombers resulted in further food shortages and the widespread destruction of essential infrastructure. By the end of the war, everyone was working, and all factories ceased civilian goods production, focusing solely on items required for the war. By 1944, almost all work was being done abroad by 7 million foreign slave workers. Welcome to the final episode of our AQA German History series. But before we begin, I do want to give a disclaimer, as we're going to be talking about sensitive topics in this video. The video will be split in 3 parts. First, we'll discuss social policies impacting women, youth, education, religious control, Aryan ideology, and the final solution. Later, we will discuss the control tactics employed by figures such as Goebbels and Himmler. And, to end the video on a more optimistic note, we'll touch upon opposition and resistance groups in Nazi Germany and the end of the war. Let's get to it. The ideal woman for the Nazi party was an Aryan, unemployed, family-focused mother that gave birth to future German soldiers. Women were meant to follow the Nazi motto, Kinder, Küche, Kirche, kids, kitchen, church. Joseph Goebbels wrote in 1929. Hitler wanted a high birth rate so that his Aryan population would grow. Contraceptions and abortions were banned. Loans were given to newly married couples, and medals were awarded to the mothers who had the most amount of children. And these women, while they weren't spawning future German soldiers, joined organizations such as the German Women's League, which focused on teaching and practicing how to cook, clean, and take care of children. Although measures were introduced that strongly discouraged women from working, World War II saw hundreds of thousands of men being conscripted into the army, resulting in major labor shortages and empty factories. Women joined the workplace, and as female labor was relatively cheap, the number of women employed actually rose by 2.4 million. Yet, the Nazi Party did not conscript women to help the war effort until 1943. Hitler continually spoke of the 1,000-year Reich, and thus saw the importance of education in controlling the country. The Nazis made sure to have tight control over schools, summer camps, and groups to ensure the indoctrination of children into the Reich. This is what a normal day of school in Nazi Germany would look like. Physical education played a critical role in schools, with a rigorous schedule of 5 one-hour lessons per week. This emphasis aimed to ensure that future children would be physically fit and prepared for potential military service in the future. Meanwhile, young girls were sent to improve their childcare and domestic skills. Chemistry and mathematics were downgraded in importance, leaving more space for the great history of Germany and the Nazi Party, and eugenic classes hidden under the label of biology. The Nazis rewrote textbooks, added Nazi propaganda, and new classes such as race study and ideology, promoting anti-Semitic narratives and the glorifying of the Aryan race. After school, the Nazis controlled young people's free time through groups like the Hitler Youth, which taught boys combat skills and weapon training, and the League of German Maidens, which taught girls even more domestic skills like cooking, childcare, and preparing for motherhood. If you want to see an entertaining example of how children lived in Nazi Germany, I would recommend watching the fantastic movie Jojo Rabbit, which will give you an idea of how these youth groups worked. After signing the Reich Concordat, which you can learn more about in this video, Hitler did the usual and immediately broke the agreement, harassing Catholic priests and Catholic clubs all around the country. The church was overall divided, with some admiring and others loathing the Nazi Party. But Hitler knew the importance of religion and sought to control or limit the influence of Christianity. The Nazis reorganized the Protestant Church in 1933 and transformed it into the Reich Church. In 1933, the Ministry of Churches was set up, church schools were abolished, and the Nazi Party aimed to influence young people by promoting Hitler Youth rather than church youth groups. Other religions, such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, were sent to concentration camps and persecuted, as were others such as Muslims and other religious minorities. But no group suffered more during the Nazi regime than Hitler's go-to scapegoat, the Jewish people. The treatment of Jewish people in Nazi Germany underwent a drastic transformation from being regular citizens in 1933 to being completely dehumanized and stripped of their basic rights and humanity by the 1940s. Let's take a closer look at the timeline and how the Nazi Party, through its tactics and propaganda, were able to dehumanize this group. In 1933, as soon as Hitler took to power, he introduced his ideas of eugenics into German society and spread the idea that the German race, or Aryans, were the superior master race. The Nazis encouraged and rewarded anti-Semitic behavior. Books were burnt publicly, Jewish workers were fired, and Jewish businesses were boycotted. In 1935, the Nuremberg Laws formalized anti-Semitism in Germany. German citizenship was revoked for Jewish people, and marriages between Jewish and non-Jewish individuals were banned. Before 1938, Jews had faced discrimination and were subjected to anti-Semitic policies in Nazi Germany, but nothing compared to the events of Kristallnacht. Many see this as a turning point for the Jewish people in Nazi Germany. On the 9th of November 1938, Nazi hate against the Jewish community turned physical and violent. After the supposed assassination of a German ambassador to France by a Jew, the SS attacked and burned Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues in retaliation. This caused massive amounts of damage and also included the death of 100 people. Many Jews were arrested and later taken to concentration camps. From the outbreak of war in 1939 until the end of the war in 1945, Jewish people faced further persecution, and in 1941, the Nazi Party was looking for a final solution to the Jewish problem. As Germany expanded and annexed new territories, more Jewish populations fell under Nazi control. Therefore, they organized special murder squads known as Einsatzgruppen. These squads followed the advancing German armies and rounded up all Jewish communities. They were forced to dig their own graves before being shot. However, this horrific display of violence was not efficient enough for the Nazis. Death camps were built all around Poland, far away from Germany and hidden from the German people. When the Jewish populations arrived in these camps, they were split into two groups, those who could work and those who couldn't. The second group was sent straight to the showers, which were actually gas chambers. There, they were quickly murdered. The first group was not spared either, as they would be worked to death or sent to the gas chambers when not useful to the German war machine. By the end of the war, 6 million Jews had been worked to death, gassed, or shot. Many other individuals deemed Untermensch, which translates to racially or socially inferior, were also part of this genocide. Romani people, Slavic people, black people, disabled people, and homosexuals were also murdered by the Nazi Party at absurd rates. These inhumane and atrocious acts by the Nazi Party, even if accepted by part of the German population, still had to be hidden from the public. Hitler knew he needed tight control over what the German people believed and used 3 weapons to do this. The Schutzstaffel, better known as the SS, was an organization under Hitler's right-hand man, Heinrich Himmler, who was responsible for ensuring that the population remained under control. It also oversaw the Gestapo or secret police that spied on ordinary German citizens and ran concentration camps. The legal system also helped the Nazis gain control. All judges in Germany had to become members of the Nationalist Socialist League and had to swear an oath of loyalty to the Führer. However, the Nazis' biggest success in controlling their population was not violence or fear, but propaganda. Under Goebbels, the Nazi Party and Hitler became a cult. The Führer presented himself as a godlike savior for Germany that would ensure the 1,000-year Reich under his rule. The Nazi propaganda machine produced all sorts of posters, speeches, pictures, and art exhibitions and films that convinced the German people that they were on the right side of history. On a lighter note, let's finish the video talking about the opposition to the Nazi Party and the end of the war. Although limited due to the tight enforcement of the Gestapo and the SS, there was still considerable resistance inside German territory. Many groups were created in opposition to Hitler's youth. The White Rose Group stood as a beacon of non-violent resistance against the Nazi regime, consisting mainly of students from the University of Munich. They distributed anti-Nazi leaflets advocating for passive opposition to Hitler's dictatorship. Their brave actions, however, were short-lived due to the arrest and execution of key members in 1943. The Swing Youth also existed, which was a rebellious movement of young people who defied Nazi ideology through swing music, fashion, and a spirit of nonconformity. They rejected the regime's norms and embraced a different cultural lifestyle as a form of protest. Edelweiss Pirates also rejected the strict control of Hitler's youth and engaged in activities promoting individual freedoms, adventure, and resistance, often clashing with Nazi authorities. Unfortunately, these groups were often decentralized, serving more as a symbol of resistance than a direct threat to the Nazi Party's authority. The closest this resistance actually came to fruition was the 1944 assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler. In the heart of World War II, a secret plan was brewed amongst high-ranking German military leaders, a daring conspiracy to end the tyranny of Adolf Hitler. This secret scheme, known as the July Plot of 1944, was a bold attempt to assassinate Hitler, seize control of the government, and negotiate a favorable peace with the Allies. The coup, codenamed Valkyrie, took shape in late 1943. On July 20th, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, armed with a bomb concealed in a briefcase, entered a conference room at the Volksanschluss field headquarters where Hitler assembled his top military personnel. Placing the briefcase near Hitler, Stauffenberg detonated the bomb. Believing the Führer had perished, he hurried to Berlin to intend to seize control. The blast killed a few officers, but Hitler miraculously escaped serious harm, leaving us with this striking image of Hitler and Mussolini staring into the blast and what could have been. Another significant example of resistance was the 1944 Warsaw Uprising, a remarkable display of Polish resistance. Civilians, including children, bravely engaged in street battles against the heavily armed German forces. This revolt tragically concluded after 63 days of intense fighting, as Polish resistance fighters, lacking outside support, were faced with overwhelming German forces and surrendered in early October. Paris was also a hotspot of rebellious activities against the oppression of the Nazi Party. Networks such as the French Resistance, composed of diverse groups and individuals, worked to defy the occupiers and supported Allied efforts by sabotaging, gathering intelligence, and publishing underground newspapers and propaganda. This spirited resistance in Paris symbolized a unified front against the oppressor, contributing significantly to the eventual liberation of the city by the end of the war. So this concludes the end to this study guide. Hopefully this video helped you revise for your exams, and if it did, make sure to share it with your friends and colleagues. Good luck, and thanks for watching.